things that go on the actual offer or contract. So we're going to give you a brief overview of some of the things that go on the contract. So the very first section is going to be that property description. So really that's just the legal description of the property. It's going to tell you exactly where the property is located, its lot and section, if it's located within a subdivision, and its mailing address as well. So from there we move on to section 2, which is going to be about pricing and financing. This is going to show you how much you plan on offering. So when you say you want to offer $700,000 on a property, that is the sales price. And the next slide is going to talk about your down payment, the percent or dollar amount that you plan on putting down. And then the next section, 2C, is going to talk about your financing. So depending on your pre-approval, as we move down further on that page, we also see a seller subsidy. We're going to cover that towards the back end of the contract. And then if you are using financing, whether or not your contract is contingent upon their financing. So you need to get full loan approval before you'll be able to close on the property. Same thing goes for an appraisal. If you are using a loan, then you probably will need to have the property appraised, or your lender will require an appraisal. So if the buyer is saying that this is going to be their primary residence, they need to check that box off on the sales contract as well.
We're in section number 3. So the buyer's earnest money deposit is usually held by the title company. At least that's the practice that we use. And we also give our clients 5 days after the date of ratification, which we might as well just kind of spell out. The date of ratification is after all parties have signed the contract.
So and come to terms. Yes.
Come to terms.
The next section is settlement date. It says that you're going to close by a certain date. Now that's the third party consideration, right?
You get to choose what settlement agent you use or title company. Section number 5 is about down payment. So make sure that that is made using a certified cashier's check or bank wired fund.
And then the next section is delivery. That's just going to specify where documents need to be delivered. So any communication between the listing agent and the selling agent needs to go to whatever is outlined here. And this is how we can confirm that deadlines are met.
Item number 7 is just stating about the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act.
Next up, we have the Property Owners Association Act and the Condo Act. We'll cover those together. If the property is included in either a Property Owners Association or a HOA or a condo association, then sellers are required to provide the buyers with the resale disclosure packet, or you have to let the buyer know in writing that the packet is not available. And for the buyers, when you receive that packet, you have 3 days to review them. It's going to include any violations, the rules and regulations of the association, the bylaws, the financials of the association. You want to make sure that you review those in their entirety, because during that 3-day review period, you are able to void your sales contract for any reason. And if that 3-day period expires, you may not go back later and say that you would like to void it because of something you later found in those contracts. And right here in section 10, we talk about property maintenance and condition along with inspections. So right here, you're going to tell the seller how you expect to receive the property. You want to receive the property broom clean, free of debris, and it should be in the same physical condition of either the date of the offer, the date of the home inspection, or another date chosen by the seller. And also, this is an important note for sellers, because this is a question that comes up often. Sellers, in the contract, it says right here in section 10 that you're going to have all utilities on through settlement. And then moving on, again, we talk about if the property is going to have a home inspection, you're going to select in this same section if you're planning on having a home inspection and making the sale contingent upon that, or if you're going to waive the right to have a home inspection. But if you're electing not to have a home inspection, which we don't recommend, but you can still have an inspector come in. But if you're going to do that, it has to also be outlined in the contract at the time that you make the offer. So it says right here in section 10 that the contract is not contingent upon a home inspection, that the seller will provide access during a certain period of time to the selling agent, along with a licensed and insured inspector. But that has to be outlined on the front end. So you can't say, oh, I'm not going to have a home inspection at all, and then 10 days into the contract say, oh, I would like to have a home inspector come by. So all of these things have to be ironed out on the front end. We talk about the possession date next. And so possession date is settlement date. Once everyone goes to the closing table and everyone has signed, the seller is responsible for turning over all of the keys, every key fob, the mailbox keys, which are often forgotten. All of those things need to be turned over to the new homeowner at settlement. And then we have like some housekeeping things. Next up, we have utilities. So it's going to outline just what utilities are included, or which different types of utilities you have. So next up, we have personal property and fixtures. So that's going to tell you what conveys, or what conveys means what stays. So what do you get to keep in the property? So next up, if the home was built before 1978, you do have the option to have a lead-based paint testing. And we'll talk about another inspection would be a wood destroying insect inspection. So that is going to be paid for either by the buyer or the seller. Next up, we're going to talk about home warranties. Do you want a home warranty? And if so, who's going to pay for it? So we have the option where the buyer can pay for it and it'll come out at the closing table. They'll pay for it, or the seller can pay for it.
Well, number 19 is a damage or loss. So just know that if there is some type of property fire or any type of damage to the property, you do not have to take possession of it.
Yes.
It's still the seller's property.
It's the seller's property until settlement. And then next up, at number 20, we have title. So when you select your title company, they are going to search and make sure that the owner is the person who is selling you the property, and they're able to provide you with clear title at settlement. All right. So next up, we have notice of possible filings of mechanics lien. Anyone who's done work on the property within the last 90 days could put a lien on the property. So it's important that if there are any liens on the property, that the title company search that. Now, there are going to be several fees to both the seller and the buyers that are going to be paid at the closing table. For the seller, they have things like deed preparation, the closing costs in relation to any existing encumbrances, several taxes. That's all on the seller side, and the seller is responsible for their fees. And then on the buyer side, they also have a number of fees, which are going to include that title search that we talked about. So both parties will have fees. And right here, we're saying in section 22 that each party is responsible for their individual fees. Now, broker's fees are typically paid by the seller, and any compensation to the brokers is as listed in the MLS listing. So, and that's as of what's found in the date of the offer. Next up, we have adjustments. So when we see the settlement statement, there are going to be some things that are going to be prorated, or some items. There are going to be some items that the seller may be due money back for. So if the seller has already paid taxes for the year, from the date of possession on, they will be refunded for anything they've already paid. So next up, we have attorney fees. It says that if either party wants to have an attorney review their documents, everybody is responsible for their own. It basically spells out who will be responsible for what. If one party defaults or the other, then if they are sued by the other party, it spells out who will be responsible for all legal fees, and also who will be responsible for any commissions that are due. If one of the parties defaults, then they could be responsible for paying the commission that was due to both brokerages. Number 27 says that if the contract becomes void and is no longer in force and effect, then both parties agreed that the earnest money deposit, which was talked about in section 3, will be returned to the buyer.
Now, as far as definitions are concerned, we already talked about data ratification. One thing I wanted to highlight was the definition for letter E. It says, for the purpose of computing time periods, the first day will be the day following delivery, and the time period will end at 9 p.m. on the day specified. So just keep in mind that 9 p.m. is going to be a very popular number, or a very popular time for when we need to have things turned in, or when we should expect to receive some type of communication from the seller, or if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, from the buyer.
The seller's subsidy is the payment that a seller would make towards a buyer's charges. So in the event, not so much in this market, but in the event that you are able to ask the seller for some credit or closing costs, essentially that's going to be them paying money towards the money you would have to bring to the closing table at settlement. Now, time is of the essence. That means that the date and time frames agreed upon by all parties must be met. Then the next one we want to talk about is the entire agreement. Buyers and sellers should carefully read the contract to make sure the terms are accurate. This is why we ask all of our clients to read the document beforehand, because it is a binding legal agreement. And in the hot market like we're in now, you may be making offers very quickly.
Number 32 is assignability. That's not something that that we really see that often, but it just says you can't really assign without written permission. And then 33 is about additions, and this is like any contingencies or additional documents. So there's a long list of items here, but the document we see added most is the home inspection, radon testing contingency, conventional financing, or VA, FHA, USDA financing, and then there is the post-settlement occupancy.
And that's it. The last page just has the contact information for all agents involved.
So that was everything that goes into a contract. So that was question number 33 from 100 questions every first-time home buyer should ask.